because everything you do it unto the Lord. And if you steward the small things well, like you said, then he's going to go, okay, well done. You stewarded this tiny thing well. Let me help you steward something bigger. Let me give you bigger opportunities.
Yeah.
But then recognizing when you need to say yes, recognizing when you need to say no. And again, just trusting God through the entire process. His plans for us, you know, they're not our business. They're God's business.
Yeah.
And it's just our job to say, okay, God, whatever you have for me, I'll say yes to it. Whatever that looks like, and whatever season I'm in, I'm going to be in this season. I'm going to be present in this season right now. But whatever you have for me, I'm going to say yes to it.
You're listening to the Big Ideas Podcast with Ashlee Ilg. Tune in for honest conversations as we pursue bold dreams, redefine what is possible, and empower the next generation to live big. You'll hear stories that prove over and over again that just because something wasn't a part of our plan doesn't mean it won't be used for our good. Whether you're already an entrepreneur, you dream of becoming one, or you're raising the next generation of entrepreneurs, this podcast is for you. There's no time to waste on your big ideas. So let's get started. Here's your host, Ashlee Ilg.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Big Ideas Podcast. I am Ashlee Ilg, of course, and it is so good to have you back. We have just been loving this season so much. I hope y'all have been as well. It has just been so good for my heart and my soul. And so today's guest is my very, very best friend, Mary Clarice Hathaway. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, bestie.
I told her we've come up with a life hack as two busy moms, business owners, that if you want to have a conversation with your best friend in the middle of the day, in the middle of the week, you just have to plan a podcast together. And then the whole world goes quiet and you can put everything on Do Not Disturb and you can have an uninterrupted conversation. So
yes,
secretly,
yes,
that is the motivation behind this podcast episode. So we're just inviting y'all into just the conversation between her and I. So it's going to be so good. But yeah, so backstory, Reese and I have been best friends for forever, over 20 years now. And we've gone through a lot of life. We were just talking and I was like, listen, we can talk about a lot of things, and we definitely will on future episodes as well. So we had to kind of hone in what matters right now. And if you've been following along, this podcast season is all about just sharing stories that just bring light to what God is doing in ways that we would have never seen coming. Maybe we wouldn't have even planned it that way, because a lot of times we think our plan is better. Speaking from experience, and all these just amazing stories of where we thought we had it all figured out. We thought we knew how this was supposed to go. And then out of nowhere, God just kind of caught us by surprise, called us to something brand new, gave us permission to walk into something brand new, knowing that he would be there with us every step. And so Mary Clarice has just kind of recently been walking this new journey. I mean, like I said, we could talk about a lot of different points in your life where this has kind of been a theme as well. But specifically, in the last week, you were elected as chairwoman of the Cobb County GOP, which is one of the biggest counties, I believe, in Georgia. So congratulations, officially, formally.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we're going to kind of retrace how that happened, what led up to that, some of the decisions you made kind of along the way in the last several weeks, last couple months, and then even kind of tracing back to oh yeah, I could see where God kind of started weaving this story into my life. And so why don't you just kind of pick up from the story of maybe from 4 weeks ago, what was that conversation that was like, hey, Reese, I think you should do this, maybe kind of pick up the story right there.
Yeah. So several weeks back, I had a friend that I met, one of those thin thread situations. I actually met him back last year because I was selling an iPad on Facebook Marketplace.
Yes.
And it turned out that he was a political consultant, and, we chatted, and, I told him that, I had been really involved in politics in my early 20s, and I thought that's what my career path was going to be. And, I took a big pivot and got married and started building businesses with my husband and raising a family and having more kids and all that kind of stuff. So, at the end of our initial conversation, he's like, have you ever thought about running for public office? And I was like, no, never, not at all. And that's a hard pass. And he was like, well, you should. And I was like, really? That's interesting. He's like, yeah, you should, because you don't want to. He said, most people, they run because they want the power or the control. Like their motive is for themselves. He said, you should run because you don't want to. And so therefore your motive is, to serve and not, and has nothing to do with you. And I'm like, that's some weird,
that's interesting.
Like reverse. Yeah, it's weird reverse psychology, but okay. But no, the answer is still no. So fast forward a few weeks ago, he called me up, and there had been some different things kind of stirring in my spirit after that conversation that I battled, to be completely transparent. But he called me a few weeks ago and he said, hey, this position's opened and I think you should run. I think you have a shot to win. I think you'd actually be great. And I was like, okay, yeah, I mean, tell me about it. And so he kind of told me about it. And, I said, okay. I said, well, let me make one phone call. And I said, our oldest, who, like, he and his wife are also two of our best friends. And, we're just in lockstep with each other in pretty much every way. And I said, let me make one phone call. And I said, if Jeffrey Jr. will do this with me, and he'll run with me, because you have your chairman, you have what you call a first vice chairman, and then you have other vice chair positions. But I said, if he'll run with me and he'll be my first vice chair, I'll consider it. So I called Jeffrey and I said, this is psychotic and it's out of left field and it's totally crazy. And I said, go home and talk to Christina and see what she thinks. I said, but this kind of got thrown into my lap. And I said, if you'll run with me and be my first vice chair, I'll consider it. And he was like, you know what? He said, one of the things that we always talk about within our family is creating impact, creating an impact with everything that we do, whether it's business or, supporting ministries or, getting involved in our community, whatever the case may be. He said, we're always talking about creating impact. And he said, if this is another way we can create impact and influence our community and our county, he was like, I'm in. He's like, if you're in, I'm in. And I was like, okay.
You're like, you weren't supposed to say it that easily.
Yeah.
Can we talk about how this was psychotic for a minute?
Should you have said no? If you had said no, I would have said no. So anyway, it was just kind of crazy. And so I said, okay. I said, well, then I'll call my buddy back and I'll tell him that, that we'll do it. And really, to be completely transparent, not even having like a complete understanding or a complete grasp of the entirety of the process. But I felt like if I was supposed to say yes, then that's what I was going to say. And, then I was going to leave the rest of the details up to God. And, that's not my job to figure out all the details. My job is just to say yes and see what doors he opens. So we hit the ground running. And it was a crazy 3 weeks of, campaigning and reaching out to a ton of people that were delegates and involved and members. And, we made as many contacts as we could make. And there were candidate forums that I had to go to. We did a meet and greet at the office. I mean, we kind of hit the ground running and said, okay, we're gonna give it everything we've got. And if we win, great. And if we don't win, great. I can still go to bed at night knowing I gave it my best shot.
Yeah.
Anyway, last Saturday they voted and we ended up winning. And I think, after the first round of voting, I don't go into anything. If I'm going to do something, I'm going in with the attitude and the idea that I'm going to win.
Right.
But going in, my team and I, because at that point I had assembled a team, of people that were going to, basically come on board and be elected along with me. So, we'd kind of decided, look, if we can just get the second highest number of votes, then we could force things into a runoff and we might have a shot to win.
Yeah.
Anyway, we ended up getting the highest number of votes on round one, but we didn't have a simple majority or a 2/3 majority. Nobody did. So then we went into a runoff, and then we ended up getting, it was like 161 votes to like 97.
Yeah.
So, and I was like, holy cow, this just happened,
Yeah.
And so, but we were excited. My team was excited. And I say my team because there's no I in any of this. Just because you might be the one in the position, so to speak, it's a team effort. Yeah. And these organizations are they do a lot. There's a lot of work to be done. So anyway, our team, we hit the ground running basically that day, and the rest is history. We've got, we're already working on elections that we have coming up. We've got 2 special elections coming up, for our county. So
yeah,
it's just been it's been a wild process.
So
to say the least.
Yeah, well, and like you said, I mean, it's been a week now and there's so much work to do, obviously. So you've kind of just gotten started and tackling all the priorities, and we'll get into maybe some of the distractions that have already popped up along the way as we go. But you mentioned already how, that first conversation with, Facebook Marketplace buyer, Matt, which just, that was months ago. That was several months ago. And
it was like back in July or August. I mean, it was like a long time ago. It's crazy.
It was no, actually, I know exactly when it was, because it was when we went to the Lion King at the Fox Theater, and because you brought it up at dinner, or it was like right before that, because you brought it up at dinner, and you were like,
it was within a couple weeks of that.
Yeah. And you were like, so there's this crazy idea on the table, and it's so crazy, and I'm definitely not doing it. Do you remember that conversation?
So I think I had met Matt a little bit before that, but that conversation was when I had started thinking about running for my state house seat.
Right.
For my area.
Right.
And I had started toying with that idea, and I'd started really thinking about that.
Yeah.
But, I could kick the can down the road, because that election's not at this point, it's 1.5 years away, but at that point it was 2 years away.
Right.
So I was like, well, I can kick that can down the road. I don't need to think about that.
Right. Do you want to tell the story, or should I, of when you were like, I literally remember you at dinner saying like, I'm not doing this, but hear this crazy idea. And me and Eileen both were like, I think I was a little bit more aggressive about it. Like, you are definitely doing this. Like, what is there to think about? Do you remember? And then you were like, we're changing the subject.
Eileen was like, okay. And you were like, why would you not do this?
Yes.
Because I think I was like, if y'all could just be praying about this.
Yeah.
For me. And, whatever. And you were like, I mean, I'll pray about it, but why would you not do this? Anyway, I was like, how's your hamburger? Let's talk about something else. Very quick pivot. Quick pivot.
Yes. And then, so we talk all the time, but recently when all of this, more local Cobb County opportunity kind of, presented itself, landed on your lap, however you want to say it, just in the last several weeks, you and I were out walking, and you were like, I feel like God, like I told God yes to the big picture, the 2-year plan. Like, okay, I'll do this, because you eventually, let me talk you into doing what you should do.
Right.
And because that's what good friends do. And I didn't talk you into it. I reminded you all the reasons why it was the best idea ever. Duh. Hey friend, I wanted to take a quick pause to ask if you've taken the quiz yet to find out what type of dreamer are you. It's super important to discover what's working for you, but also some things that may be keeping you from really pursuing your greatest purpose. It takes just 2 minutes to find out if you're the skimboarder, the sunbather, the sandcastle builder, or the surfer babe. So jump over to dreamerquiz.com and be sure to share your results and tag me in it. Now back to the show. But I remember you saying it was like I said yes to that, and then God was like, oh, let's see how serious your yes really was. How about 2 weeks from now? Yes, not 2 years. And you were like, oh, do you remember that?
This was not, I distinctly remember that. I'm like, this is not
I was like, oh, that's exactly what's happening. So talk about that. Talk about like when you say yes, it still doesn't mean it's going to go according to plan. It still doesn't mean it's just like, I said yes, let's go see, how this is going to play out with my, actually, Aaron Weathers said something really on point with that whole idea on episode 31 of this season, where she said, nothing in her life has ever gone according to this, I think she called it perfect timeline people. It's like one of my favorite quotes.
Yes.
And she said, and I think that's because for a lot of us, not everybody, but obviously God knows how each of us are wired. He wired us himself. And so it's almost like he only gives us these shorter windows to move forward and to take action and to steward and move and go when in these shorter windows versus maybe this 2-year window. And I'm not saying you would have done this, but I think there are a lot of us that are like, oh yeah, 2 years, that gives me time to kind of get comfortable with it, wrap my brain around it, take care of some other things. Yeah. And that's what Erin's point was, exactly, like justify why this isn't the right timing. My ducks are still not in a row. Imagine that. Right. And so it's like, God's like, your window of time is now 2 weeks. And you're going to go, and I'm going to make it really, really clear. And there's going to be no doubt that this is what you should be doing. And, so yeah, I mean, just kind of talk about that. Like, what did your yes mean to you? You said that there were some things that even from like back in September, October, where that first conversation where there were still things just kind of stirring in your spirit. Like maybe, I don't know, you tell me, like what was going on between then and, just a couple weeks ago.
Well, first of all, that episode you did with Erin was so good. And I loved it. And yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, okay, all right, God, if you're calling me to something, you're going to have to open up the doors. I'll say yes, but you're going to have to open up the doors. Like, I don't even know where to begin, and again, the plot twist, well, actually it's not going to be 2 years down the road. It's going to be 2 weeks down the road, and this is going to be crazy. And, to me, when it doesn't make any logical sense, I mean, even Sunday morning when I woke up the next morning, like after the election, I was like, there's just so much of this that makes no logical sense, which just tells me that God's got his hand on it. And while there's been, distractions and opposition, I fully just am like, okay, you led me here. I do believe your hand was all over this. And so I believe you're gonna help me fight these battles. Going back to the fall after that initial conversation, and I was like, I would never run for public office. I mean, truly, I didn't even know where to begin. Yeah. And, I started actually looking up information about running for a House seat and all this kind of stuff. I mean, people don't do it for the money. State politics is not, you don't do it for the money. I can promise you that. And it would have been you have to be in session for a couple months, which is every day down at the Capitol building, away from my kids, away from my family. But I kind of went through this process of like, why am I still stewing over this if I'm so against it? Because if I'm so against it, why do I keep thinking about it? And I did. I kind of kept thinking about it and really wrestling with it and really being like, no, I don't think I want to do this actually, okay, but if I'm going to do it, I've got time, it's fine. I've got time to talk myself out of it. And, but it was like, okay, the more I thought about it and the more I stewed over it, and it wasn't like a constant every day I wasn't thinking about it, but just from time to time it would, Matt would call me and be like, hey, what are you doing? You should do this, you should do that, and I'm like, and I told him, I said, you're probably the only person crazy enough to even get me to think about it. And so
he's like your own personal hype guy.
He's like my own personal hype guy. And that's what he's a political consultant. That's what he's done. That's what he does. He's great at his job. But then it just was like, okay, the more I was against it, but the more my spirit stirred and the more I questioned it. And it really, it kind of came down to this, I guess, conversation I was having with God, or maybe myself. And it was like, okay, why would I not? Like, why would I say no? And I've said no to a lot of things over the years. I've said no to even the most minute things. Do you want to be the classroom mom? Definitely not. Deleting that email. I will bring you the nicest fruit bowl for Grandparents' Day, but I don't want to be the class mom. I'm going to under promise and I'm going to over deliver. And, and a lot of it boiled down to, our life is good. Our life is so good. I can go and do as I please and we can travel and, I get to spend the majority of my time with my family. And that's the most important thing to me, and my kids, and I get to be heavily involved and, all these things. And it was like, it kind of honestly came down to comfort. I would say no. And I would say, okay, God, I don't want to do this because I'm really comfortable right now. And then I'm like, that's not what I've spent the last 18 years of my life. I've spent the last 18 years of my life learning to get outside of my comfort zone.
Yeah.
And so, okay, so that's not a good reason. I can't say no to this just because I'm comfortable. We're supposed to get outside of our comfort zone. I don't think there's anybody that's ever done anything of significance without getting outside their comfort zone. Pam Winters 101. Everything you want in life is just outside of your comfort zone, but you're never going to get it unless you get outside of yourself. So then I was like, I really regret learning some of the things I've learned over the last 18 years, but that's honestly kind of what it boiled down to was this is a dumb reason to not do something. And quite honestly, it just boils down to being selfish, So if there's an opportunity for me to serve my community and there's an opportunity for me to serve, or create impact in some capacity, okay, I'll say yes to it.
Yeah.
What it looks like beyond that, I have no idea, but I'll say yes to it.
Yeah. So you mentioned, one of the biggest reasons to not wanting to do is, it might take some time away from your family and stuff. And the reality is it will. And that was one of your biggest concerns, not really wanting to give that up. And obviously nobody would argue with that. Like, obviously time with family, it's critical. That's huge. You've got two young ones, your one son is about to turn 13, your daughter's 11, it's just, and then you have others and you have grandkids, which is its own plot twist in itself. And so,
we've got a full life. I don't lack. I'm not sitting around, I wasn't sitting around being quote unquote comfortable because I'm watching 3 hours of the Today Show every single morning.
Right.
It was, I had a full plate.
Yeah.
I still have a full plate.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
well, Christina and I, Jeffrey Jr.'s wife, for those listening, her and I were, at dinner with a big group of people for Katie's birthday. And we were talking, I was like, we're talking about how just exciting it was because that was literally the night of your election and you had just won and we all knew you had won and you were on your way to meet up with us and stuff. And her and I were like, or she said, I forget who said it. One of us had said, you take care of so many people, like you love your people so well. And you have a lot of your people and they count on you. They depend on you. They all love you and love you well too. And Christina said, and now she has all of Cobb County to take care of too, and to love well. And I was like, and she's going to love them just as well, and we both were fully in agreement of your capacity to love well and to open up your net, your arms wider to take care of even more people. But at the same time, it was like, and all of Cobb County, And so
that's not daunting at all.
No big deal. There's no needs there. Everybody's gonna be on board with everything 100% of the time. But I wanted to ask you, so like especially with your young kids, and your older ones too, they just obviously can have a little bit, probably more of a mature perspective about the whole thing and a more long-term picture. But how are you keeping the perspective of, yes, there is going to be some sacrifice. Yes, I am going to have to spend some time away from y'all to serve all of Cobb County.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun. But, what are you hoping that they're going to learn in the process? What are you hoping that they're going to see by your example in the process? Because I know that as a mom, you and I are kind of wired that same way. Like, yes, we love raising our children. We love spending time with them. But at the same time, like one of our, undercurrents is, but we also want to show them, what it means to pursue a dream, what it means to pursue a calling, what it means to be obedient to God and to see where it goes.
Yeah.
So, how are you doing that? What are you hoping they'll see from all of this?
Well, I think what you just said, what it looks like to step out on faith and do something, what it looks like to overcome things that look like they're not possible, what it looks like to really serve, when there's not a ton of benefit in return. And I don't mean there's not benefit. The benefit is that, we win local elections and then we win statewide elections. There's a benefit there, but
right.
This is a volunteer position. I'm not making money doing this.
Yeah.
There's no day-to-day benefit, for me on a personal level. I don't know why anybody would do anything like this if you don't really have a heart to serve and you don't really have a heart to like influence or impact your community at the local level, at the most grassroots level.
Yeah.
If you want position and power, this is not, maybe for some people that's how they perceive it. But that's not at all how I perceive it. I'm like, no, this is an opportunity to serve my community. And what I hope to show my kids is that sometimes the craziest things are literally God just telling you to say yes. And so teaching them obedience, even when it's crazy, pursuing something without going, well, what's in it for me?
Mm.
Just say yes and just go for it.
Yeah.
The benefit to you, you'll figure that out down the road if there is one.
Yeah.
The benefit to the community. I mean, that's the greater benefit. What can I do to impact and influence my county and my community?
Yeah.
And again, I mean, servitude, getting outside your comfort zone, saying yes when you really want to say no. Just simple obedience.
Yeah.
But if we don't say yes to the most simple of things, then we're not going to be given opportunities to say yes to even bigger things.
Yeah. Yeah. And yes, it seems nuts, but kind of like we alluded to at the beginning too, like there has been parts like you even mentioned it too, your interest in politics, back in college and even looking into a career, on Capitol Hill and having a lot of friends that went in that direction, like right out of college. Yeah. So it's like out of left field, you didn't see it coming now, but at the same time, like there have definitely been some thin threads that have been woven together over these years. And you and I have kind of talked about like, you can almost kind of see it now, at least a little bit more clearly, where you're like, oh, of course it had to happen now. Like now right. I'm, and maybe kind of go into like how you feel like this timing is actually much more ideal than it would have been, in your early 20s.
Well, in my early 20s, that was going to be my career path. Politics was going to be my career path. And there's part of me that's like, okay, were there seeds sown then that are, coming up now? Seeds always come up somewhere at some point. And, I'm not sure how things would have turned out when I was younger. I'm not sure, I think life experience and motherhood and business and maturity and, learning how to lead and understand people and deal with people and all that kind of stuff. I think that is the greatest asset that I bring to the table. It's not my 20 years of, prior political experience, because I've poked it with a stick. I've done some things over the years. I've campaigned, I've put out signs for people. I did poll watching a couple years ago. Yeah. I've done things here and there, but it wasn't like this moment of like, yes, this is the next step for me, because I have been so focused on
right.
my own personal political career for the last 20 years, because I haven't. And while the timing now didn't necessarily make sense, 20 years ago, it did make sense. If my kids were younger, I'm not sure it would have worked. They're pretty self-sufficient. They're 11 and 12, like you said, almost 13, which blows my mind. They can get up and they can get their schoolwork done, and, they can kind of, manage, some of their own things, which is great. And I want to teach my kids to be self-sufficient and, things like that. So if they were younger, this probably wouldn't have worked. But, even to Jeff's credit, to my husband's credit, the last couple weeks, this was kind of out of left field for everybody.
Yeah.
And so the last couple of weeks, he's been getting up at like 5 and 6 o'clock in the morning. And if you know my husband, that is not his MO. We go through phases where he works a ton, and then we'll go through seasons where he's like, my office hours are between 12 and 3 on Wednesdays, and so
yeah, I think him and Andy have been having some 6 a.m. conversations, and Andy's like, what are you doing awake right now?
Yeah, I asked the same question.
Yeah.
I asked the same question. But I said, what are you getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning for? Like, what has sparked this? And he said, well, I figured if I get up a lot earlier, I can get into the office earlier. I can get done what I need to get done a lot earlier, and I can be home earlier to help you out, because now we kind of have we need to adjust for this, chairwoman position. And
yeah.
If you've got stuff going on in the evenings, I need to be around to help out with the kids and just be available to help you and whatever. And I was like, so this is a family, like everything else we do, this is a family affair.
Yeah.
And my kids have been so great. I've had to take a ton of phone calls in the car, which is not my favorite, because usually that's time when I want to spend with my kids, but I'm in the car with them so much. I can't not, do stuff in the meantime, do stuff in the process. So,
yeah.
But again, they've been incredibly, amazing and on board. And, there's a couple times where I've been like, I am really sorry. Like, this is just, it's a new normal. We'll adjust. And I'm kind of figuring out what that looks like to adjust and, also protect my time, probably more so than I've had to over the last few years. So,
yeah,
but they've been incredibly on board and incredibly helpful, and I love that. Again, our family does things together, and this is no different.
Yeah. I love that.
So
I love that. And I mean, obviously I've seen your family up close and personal, and, you know, we've done a lot of things just together over the years. And so I love that. And I think it's important too, you know, for those listening, whether you're in, you know, looking to get into the political arena, or you already are, or business, or in some sort of capacity where everything is shifting and everybody needs to kind of work together and kind of figure out how this is going to work. And, you know, Andy and I talk about that on the podcast that just came out today. And, you know, when you've got a goal and it's important, it's worth figuring out how to make it work, you know?
Right.
But on the flip side, I'd love for you to kind of talk about how, you know, it's not all roses. I mean, we're at this time of recording, you know, you're 1 week into, you know, being chairwoman of the county, and
is that all?
For all of Cobb County.
Dun, dun, dun.
And, you know, it's not been rosy. You know, it's been a little bit of drama that's completely, in our opinion, unnecessary. It's been a little hostile, to maybe put it mildly. And so, you know, in the business world, and just like probably even more so in like the female entrepreneurial world, there's a lot of talk of, you know, don't fall into wanting to people please, and, you know, just do everything for everyone's approval. And, you know, don't worry what the naysayers are saying, you know, like they haven't seen your vision. So, you know, don't put a lot of weight on what. And so we're like taught to like, or encouraged to not put a lot of weight on that. And so everybody, you know, does their best to like drown out the naysayers and focus on your goals and focus on what you're bringing to the table and what you're working towards. But like right now you have like real life opponents. Like you have people who try to shut you down before the election. You know, people trying to like, I mean, just straight up like making up crazy lies about, I mean, it's been like, it kind of brings negative to like another level of
a whole different
like
dimension
what you're dealing with.
Never experienced.
Yes. And it's so futile in the purpose of what the goal, like what everybody's goal really should be. And so I you know, I always say I never want to paint this like false rose colored glasses of like what pursuing God's call, what pursuing, you know, whether it's entrepreneurship or not, even parenthood, you know, like, yes, it's always worth it. Yes, God always comes through, but the mess in the middle, like, let's not ignore that. Like, let's not ignore the fact that like there's real stuff to overcome, and it will be worth it. But like, talk about like, you know, I mean, you're experiencing things on a level that's not super common. And so how are you navigating some of this, you know, just hostility? Just, I mean, you know, are you like, what are you doing for your own personal mindset, for your own personal peace? How to not get caught up in it, you know, like what is your mindset? How are you overcoming all of this? Is it going to stop? Like, is it going to go away? Is it just part of the process? Like kind of, I'll turn my mic off. You just kind of roll with that, you know, like how do you deal with negative?
Well, a lot of prayer. Yeah. I mean, honestly, a lot of prayer. You know, I kind of had this moment where I'm like, okay, God, if you brought me to this and you open up the doors, then what is happening? Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, there are people that are not pleased that I won, and I understand that. Yeah. You know, I don't fault people for feeling disappointed. But there's just been a lot of crazy opposition that I'm like, it's just a total distraction. I mean, again, this is a volunteer army. You know, I don't know why anybody would do this if they did not have truly a heart to serve, and a heart to really want to impact, you know, Cobb County in the political realm at the grassroots level, with a servant-minded heart. So a lot of prayer. You know, some of it has been very like, this is silly, this is exhausting. Yeah. You know, it's a distraction. We have a job to do, and there's a lot that needs to be done. Mm-hmm. And it's, you know, none of the distraction benefits Cobb County. None of the distraction is going to get people elected. None of the distraction there's just no benefit to it. Right. And people want to fight these battles that quite frankly, I don't understand. Mm. You know, I don't understand. And I've never lived in a world where, you know, friendships and relationships and all this stuff gets just, you know, torn apart and drama. And I mean, it's been a whole new world really the last few weeks that I've never been a part of. Mm. You know, I've never done cliques. I've never done, you know, factions. That's not how I've operated my life. Mm. You know, are we friends? Do we have common shared values? You know, can we work together? Do we like each other? You know, okay, let's grab arms and let's get after this thing. Mm. But it's amazing to me, or it has been amazing to me to see people that say they have shared values and a shared vision and they want the same things, but yet they're coming after just insignificant, you know, issues.
Yeah.
But again, they don't help the county. They don't help the community, you know, and it's just, and again, I understand people's disappointment, you know, when things don't swing their way. I get that. But I don't understand the, you know, making it so personal that the goal is just to hurt people.
Yeah.
I don't understand that mindset. I don't live in that world.
Yeah. And I remember you saying during the actual election, I guess it was the week leading up to it, where, you know, the opposing party or opposing just the opponents were making up stories and this and that. And you were, you know, you're almost encouraged to like fight back and kind of like get involved and like go on the defense and things like that. And I remember you telling me that you kind of like pulled your team together and you were like, we're above this. Like, we're going to stay above reproach with this. We're not going to, you know, meander in the, you know,
we're
in the
not
mire.
Involved in drama. Yeah. No, I told my whole team, I said, we're staying out of all this. We're not getting involved. We're not doing this. I don't do drama. And when I say I don't do drama, I really don't do drama. So I didn't want to be involved in any of that. You know, it was very personal. It was very, I mean, people started saying stuff about me that was just, I'm like, this is just silly. You know, like no truth to it, no foundation to it. It's just silly. But people make up, you know, weird things. And I guess maybe that's, I mean, I get it at politics at the federal level, or, you know, if you're running for some big public office, but this, I'm like, what are we doing?
Yeah. Well, and I think for people watching too, I mean, we can learn so much, yes, from what people say, but even more so often what people don't say. And for people who were watching your example and watching like, oh, you know what, she's actually not engaging in this. Like, it almost takes away its power when you're like, it's so dumb, it's not even worth my time. Like, let me show you what I'm actually interested in doing, and it's not this. And so I think for people watching all of that unfolding, and as more, you know, may or may not unfold as you know, as this office continues and whatever else is in store for you, I think having that as your, you know, one of your foundational behaviors, one of your foundational, you know, what your reputation is kind of built on, like, you're here to do the work. You're here to serve. You're not here to put anybody else down, no matter what they say to you. You're not here to, you know, just involve yourself in the drama. I mean, I think that's just such a powerful position of just holding yourself above, you know, just the garbage.
Right. I mean, it's not necessary to wade into it. You know, it's really not. I mean, all it does is give people more ammunition. Yeah. And I learned a long time ago, again, from, you know, incredible mentors that, you know, people can't argue with silence. Yeah. And there are some times where you do have to speak up and say something. Right. But, you know, the majority of the time, people can't argue with silence. And they can say whatever they want to say, but, you know, eventually they can't argue with silence. Yeah. Yeah. So, and your actions will speak louder than, you know, just a silly argument anyway. So I guess the goal is for them to see like, oh, if you can actually, you know, if you will do the things that you've promised to do, and they'll just kind of get out of the way enough, you know, like, hey, look, it's actually gonna be okay. Like, you're gonna be better off. Like, let's just work towards something that's actually gonna make a good impact, you know? Right. Because I think a lot of the opponents are actually kind of on the same side as you, like you were saying, like, hey, we should have shared values. We should have that shared mission. Like, can we actually focus on that and like get over maybe the petty ego or, you know, whatever's causing this, you know, the desire to win, you know, the desire to have the position. I mean, I don't, whatever's driving it. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So there's, you know, I kind of want to wrap this up with this whole thought on, okay, well, that's really great that you are in, you know, this official political office. You're going to do great things. I'm just, and I hate the word just, I'm just doing this. I can't make a big impact. Like this whole idea of like, you know, for those listening who are like, I want to make an impact. I want to have influence over, you know, even, you know, starting with my family, starting with my community, starting with, you know, like I've got all these big ideas. Like I just recently posted, you know, like big ideas start with small steps. Well, big offices and big influences and big platforms begin with stewarding small
platforms, small offices, small positions. Right. And so kind of speak to the idea of, you want to do something great, you want to have a big impact, but it starts where you are right now. And right. when God knows he can trust you with something small, he'll give you something greater. That whole idea that is so incredibly powerful as we steward what we've been given and we steward our gifts, to make an impact in any way we can right now. And right. trusting that if it's meant to, it will open up into something bigger. But, I'm kind of rambling, but for those listeners who are like, I want to do something great. How do I start small? How do I don't feel like I'm doing anything that matters right now. What would you say to them?
Just grow where you're planted in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to grow where you're planted in the moment. And that doesn't mean you can't think about bigger things or have desires for something else or say, okay, I really want to do this. I mean, trust me, I've been through all that.
Mm-hmm.
I've been through seasons where I'm like, there's got to be more. There's got to be, something else. And I have dreams, I have goals, I have visions.
Mm-hmm.
But not every season I've been through, there have been seasons where I just needed to be quiet and grow where I was planted and be present in that season, even if there was a yearning in my spirit for something else, and so just because you're not where you want to be now doesn't mean you're not going to get there eventually. And we have no idea what God has in store for us.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? It's none of our business. But if we just trust the process and we do what we need to do, and then when we feel that unction or feel that yearning or feel God saying, now's the time to step out, then that's when you just have to be bold enough to step out, even if it makes zero sense, even if it looks completely psychotic,
Yeah.
So, but grow where you're planted, and again, there's nothing wrong with, maybe having desires and goals and dreams and all that kind of stuff. We all do, that's how we're wired, but, and some things are bigger than others. Some people have big aspirations. Some people have small aspirations. I don't, everybody's different, but just being where you are and stewarding what you have in the moment, doing everything unto the Lord. Our pastor, Louis Giglio, did a sermon, I don't know, it's been a couple of years ago now, where he just talked about doing everything unto the Lord. And he said he worked, I don't remember where it was, but he was copying books somewhere, copying papers somewhere. And he's like, I'm in a basement all day copying papers. I mean, this was decades ago.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, but man, if I was copying papers and doing that, I was going to be the best copy boy, that there was.
Yeah.
Because everything you do it unto the Lord. And if you steward the small things well, like you said, then he's going to go, okay, well done. You stewarded this tiny thing well. Let me help you steward something bigger. Let me give you bigger opportunities.
Yeah.
But then recognizing when you need to say yes, recognizing when you need to say no.
Mm-hmm.
And again, just trusting God through the entire process. His plans for us, they're not our business. They're God's business.
Yeah.
And it's just our job to say, okay, God, whatever you have for me, I'll say yes to it, whatever that looks like, and whatever season I'm in, I'm going to be in this season. I'm going to be present in this season right now. But whatever you have for me, I'm going to say yes to it.
Yeah. So good.
Well, I mean, I don't know how to live by any other way.
Yeah.
I mean, I really don't. I've just been through enough crazy things in my life, and I've seen enough things happen that I know that God is good, God is faithful, God is righteous, and that's it.
Yeah.
No matter what.
Yeah.
Through trial, through tribulation, through great success, through small success, he has been faithful through everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think this is going to be any different.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm, honored to have gone through a lot of those seasons with you. And, as
you've been through all of them.
Yeah. I think 99% of them we've reminded each other, you either, what is the quote? I don't remember who said it or where it started, but I know a few of us have said it, you either believe God is good or you don't.
Yeah.
And you either show up every day, yes, believing his plan is good, it's for my good, or I don't believe it. And so obviously that's what I believe. And so that's how I show up every day, regardless of how I feel, regardless of what the situation looks like it's going to be, no matter how daunting it looks, no matter what's coming against me. It's like, if you don't have that, then you don't have anything. And so, but that is such a firm, solid foundation to stand on. And I'm so excited for you. I'm excited for where this is going to go. I mean, we're 1 week in and I'm like, I got to get you on the podcast right away because I want to, have this starting point of, oh my gosh, what's happening to I have no idea where it's going to go. And so that's the whole point. And I love it. And I appreciate your time. I know you've got a million appointments and meetings and phone calls to get to. And,
oh my God,
I appreciate being.
This has been so great because my phone's been blowing up like the whole time
Yes.
on the podcast. I'm like, this is like my, I can check out for like 45 minutes.
Yeah. Like I said at the very beginning, this is your life hack. This is tip number, 492 for all the working moms and business owners and creatives out there that are like, how do I find 45 minutes to work? You get on a podcast and you put your phone on Do Not Disturb and you tell everyone that you are doing a very important interview. And so this has been so good. I hope you all have enjoyed this. Yes, I have thoroughly enjoyed this. Thank you so much for, number one, doing what you're doing and just leading the way with such grace and humility and just the right heart behind it. It speaks volumes, and also for being my bestie and sharing all this with everyone listening. So,
well, I love you and I love that we got to do this.
Yeah, it's been good. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. Thank you for listening in. I know it has blessed you as much as it has blessed me. As always, keep your big ideas coming, and we will see you on the next episode. Thanks again. Hey friends, thanks so much for tuning in today. Before you go, it would mean the world to me and my family if you would share this episode with at least one person who you think might benefit from this message. And of course, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. You can also follow me at Ashlee Ilg on Instagram to keep up with our adventures and for continued encouragement as you pursue your big ideas. Thanks again for joining us. Until next time.